Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. This is Child Abuse Prevention, and Human Abuse Prevention is up to us. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and it just took me about 10 minutes to get into my show, so hopefully I'm streaming and everything is good. I've had some problems with my connection to Skype and Blog Talk Radio the last few days, so I don't know what's wrong, but obviously something's wrong. But I did get in there tonight, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me, and the show will be streaming. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into my shows. I really appreciate it. I have a lot of people listening to the archives and tuning in, and thank you very much for taking the time to do that. I really appreciate it because I do a lot of shows, and so, I know it's hard to keep track of shows, and I do appreciate everybody who's listening. And I wanted to continue talking tonight about the issues sort of surrounding child abuse and the violent family. We looked at Monday night, looked at violent fathers, and the week before we were looking at violent mothers, and this particular website has some pretty good information on it, all based on studies done by individuals and groups of people trying to look and see what the correlation is between violent families, violent parents, violent siblings, and causes and effects of abuse, sort of tying hand in hand together with that. So I just want to take a look at it because I grew up in a very violent home and grew up in an abusive home. So I find this information very helpful. And also it's just important for people to realize this is going on, whether we want to admit it or not, or even think about it. It is happening. So that's why I'm doing this and bringing this information out. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, and I just want to be one voice speaking out against abuse and standing up, for children's rights and standing up to say, hey, we got to stop child abuse, right? And also I'm a survivor, so I do, care very much about survivors and care very much about, the fact that there are so many of us out here, and I just wanted to be one more voice with all the other voices out here speaking out on behalf of survivors, and to encourage survivors of abuse to hang on, hold on with everything they have and really get help if they need it, right? So I'm going to bring up the link to what I wanted to talk about here tonight, and I had to shut everything down again to get into my chat room again, to get into my show. So this is like 2 days in a row I've had problems with getting into my show, so it's a little bit, unorganized, but that's all right. So yeah, this issue of violent siblings, this is the next portion of the actual website that we were looking at. We've been looking at all last week and this week as well. Causes and effects of child abuse, the violent family. And this is from libraryindex.com, www.libraryindex.com. And if you follow the links, it's Library Index, Issues and Debate Topics, Causes and Effects of Child Abuse, and then some contributing factors to child abuse, the violent family, abusive mothers, abusive fathers, abusive siblings. So we're on the last of this particular article, this particular portion of this library index on abuse, right? Abuse topics and social abuse and debate topics, right? And so this stuff, I lived my whole life in an abusive home until I got out of it, and I just back my own situation. I think about the fact, that my siblings were quite violent. We grew up in a violent home, so we were taught how to be violent by our parents, right? Our parents were our number one teachers, and they did a really good job in teaching us how to be violent, how to hurt people, how to not take care of ourselves, how to commit suicide, and how to generally have a bad disposition towards life, right? That's what our parents taught us, and that's not a good thing to teach your children. No child should ever have to live like that, but sadly enough, so many of us do, and grow up like that, right? It's absolutely horrific. Then as adults, we got to try to piece, some sort of normalcy into our lives, and try to, behave rationally, and try to, to learn how to cope and learn how to deal with things, that we weren't shown how to do as children, right? So I think this is just really interesting to take a look at, this one section, this last section about the abusive siblings, right? Because I'm the last of 7 children. I'm the last of 7, and there were 4 boys, 3 girls, right? And the older siblings, 2 of them were moved out by the time I was born because they were One was 18 years old when I was born. The other one was 16 years old when I was born. And both worked out by the time I came along. And the abuse was just rampant by the time I came along. That's when my parents were brought up on charges, a lot of physical abuse in the home between my parents and between my parents and my siblings, right? And then the social workers, of course, stepped in. The courts got involved, and I was a toddler when we were all being, possibly removed from the home. But my mom pleaded with the courts to let her keep children. So the court said the only way they would go for that would be if my parents went to counseling, and my parents only went to 2 sessions, and then that was it. And so we had social workers coming in the home, and I remember having to take off my clothes and allow them to check me over for signs of abuse, right? And I remember this, so that just tells you it went on for quite some time. I remember there was a man and a woman, and they had a clipboard, and they always brought me a sucker, and they would generally talk about my diapers. I was still in diapers, and I totally remember this. But there was I had to be paying attention in my home, because if you weren't paying attention, you could get yourself killed. And my home was very dangerous, very violent place, and I had to be super aware of what was going on. I think I just took that on it to try to save my life, right? But it's absolutely horrific what this does to children and what this does to families. And so I want to take a look this next portion of this article from libraryindex.com. I hope you will go check this out. There is some really good info on this website. I'm just going to bring up the link right now. I'm having to go through quite a few links to get to this link. So, causes of siblings. This is the next portion of this, and I've got the link right here. I'll pop this into the chat room, and for anybody who happens to be in there and would like to take a look at it, you're welcome to do that. Well, I have our lead volunteer coordinator here for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is here, Sandra McLeish. Hi, Sandra. I'm glad you could be here. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I appreciate your support. And just thanks for the great job you're doing. And Sandra McLeish is the volunteer coordinator for all the volunteers for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she's also the Northern Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. So she's a very busy woman. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And we do try to support each other, right? There's a whole lot of us involved with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, but we are always looking for volunteers. And today, Sandra McLeish sent out a sort of a call to action, inviting you to volunteer with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children to please get a hold of us and let us know, because we're always looking for volunteers. And you can contact Sandra McLeish on Facebook. You can contact us here on Blog Talk Radio, on DreamcatchersForAbusedChildren.com, our main domain website. You can also contact us on any of the official volunteers, that you would see the official logo for Dreamcatchers for Children, on MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Bebo, Tagged. I mean, really, there's more. We're just about everywhere we can possibly be. So get a hold of us if you want to volunteer, or if you'd like to donate and you want to make a donation, please do. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and we are accepting donations and happy to have anything anybody would like to contribute, right, to stop child abuse, because that's exactly what it's going for. So, yeah, it's great to have you here, Sandra. Thanks very much. And so I hope you're having a good night. So this particular article talking about abusive siblings, I think back to some of the stuff that my siblings did. I mean, siblings can be abusive towards each other. You know what I mean? They need to learn how to not be abusive towards their other siblings. You know what I mean? I'm going to read from this particular page right here. They said, in what parents need to know about sibling abuse, breaking the cycle of violence. That's from Springville, Utah, I guess. Bonneville Books, 2002. Vernon R. Wiehe, W-I-E-H-E, explored the reasons siblings hurt each other. Sibling abuse may stem a desire to control another person in order to take advantage of that person. And I mean, that's just kind of I'll throw this in here. Abuse is all about control. The issue, that a sibling would want to control another sibling and would resort to abuse is just something that anyone can do. See, anyone can be an abuser, whether it's a woman, a man, a child, a teenager. Anyone can be an abuser if they choose to abuse, right? So this is the whole issue. Abuse is not, just sort of relative to a person's age or to their sex or anything else, or their financial status. It's anyone can be an abuser. So siblings can be abusers too. And I know because I was abused by my siblings as well, and also sexually abused by a sibling. So this can happen. It's very sad, but it does happen. It says the sibling in control typically does not know how to empathize or be aware and sensitive to the feelings of others. And Vernon R. We noted that the reason most often given for sibling abuse is that an older sibling has been put in charge of younger siblings. Some parents may expect too much from older children, relegating parental responsibilities to them, and some children are too young to assume a parental role and may take out their frustration on younger siblings. Even if an older brother or sister is capable of babysitting their younger siblings, they lack the knowledge or skills to parent. It's very important for people to know that, if you're going to allow one of your older children to watch the younger children, that they would be able to do this, and would be at the developmentally at the right age and stage in their life with enough maturity, enough responsibility to understand, what they do, how, and how to go about doing it, and how to look after their siblings properly, right? Because if they're mature enough and they're not capable, then you don't want to leave your smaller, younger children, in the hands of who is not capable and not responsible, and will end up hurting those younger siblings, right? So this week I pointed out that sibling abuse may be a learned behavior. Children who grow up in households where they see their parents abusing each other or are the recipients of such abuse may in turn use aggression toward one another. And children also learn abusive behavior from television programs, movies, videos, and computer games. And this is exactly the issue. The children who grow up in households where they see their parents abusing each other or are the recipients of such abuse, they may in turn use aggression toward one another. And that's what happened in our case. My parents were abusing each other as well as the children. So the older children were just doing what they were watching our parents do and what they were being the recipient of, which was abuse. And they, in turn, abused the younger siblings, So not all of them. Not all of my siblings were like that. My oldest sister was. My oldest sister was the oldest in the family. I'm the youngest. She was the oldest. There's 18 years in between us. She was out of the house, married, and had her first child 3 months after I was born. And so my nephew was pretty much my age, because my sister had her first baby when my sister and my mother were both pregnant at the same time. Let's just put it that way. So... And I was born out of rape because my dad forced himself on my mother, so I was not wanted. And my sister, when she had her children, my sister was abused too. See, so she grew up with the same parents I did, right? And she was really an abuser. She took on the role of the abuser. And so she was very abusive to her husband, to her children, to me. And she was not a very nice person. I didn't like her when I was growing up. I really didn't know. I didn't know who she was until my mom told me who she was, because she used to come over to the house with her children, and I thought she was a neighbor because, they had moved out. I didn't know she was my sister, right? And then finally one day I asked my mom who this lady was who kept coming over with these children, and my mom said, "That's your sister." So I didn't really know she was even my sister. So I didn't like her. She was very abusive and rude, and when she was punishing her own children, she was punishing me too. We were all three lumped in there together. She had two boys. And so my nephews and I would, if we got in trouble, we'd all get in trouble together. So not only was I being, quote unquote, disciplined by my parents, and I was being disciplined by my sister or her husband, right? And so there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of belts flying, fists flying, kids getting shoved into walls. It was just an abusive family. We just grew up in this abusive environment, right? So she passed that on. She passed that cycle of abuse on to her children, right? My two nephews. And my mom actually had to take over the care of her grandsons, my sister's sons, her daughter's sons, because my sister was force-feeding them and almost killing them. And so my mom actually took over the care of them. So my mom could love other people's children, but she could not love her own children. That was my mom's biggest problem. She loved other people's children. She used to babysit other people's children. And then while she was babysitting these children, if we did anything like... to make noise in the house and wake them up, or, for instance, that I caught a beating for that one time. And, she would love other people's children, no problem, my mother, but she hate on for her own children and would beat on us mercilessly, right? She was a horrible mother, actually, and but she loved other people's children. So people could say, well, how could that be possible? But it's true. It's because we came from my dad, and my mom hated my dad because my dad was abusing my mom from day one when they were in this ridiculous marriage, and so the kids, we all witnessed this. We witnessed the abuse. We became, some of us like our parents, some of us not. I know I took on the role of a bully as a young kid because I would go to hug my mom and she would push me, and she'd be like, "Get away from me! I don't want you touching me. Get away from me!" Because my mom hated me because I was born out of rape. See, and so it's despicable, and I'm just telling it like it is. And so when young kids would come up, my little friends would come up to hug me, I'd push them down and push them away because that's what my mom had been doing to me all my life. That's what I thought you were supposed to do. You know what I mean? I didn't want anybody coming up to hug me. I was just taking on the role of my mother because she showed me how to behave. See, then she would beat me because she would see me doing this, and then she'd be, "What are you doing?" She'd beat me, and I couldn't understand why because, I was like, well, I'm just doing what you showed me how to do, right? So I took on the role of a bully, even though I used to protect some of my younger friends and some of my friends who I felt were being picked on, at school. Then I would kind of be their protector, but I wouldn't do that for everybody. It would only be certain people. So this is what abuse can do to children. It's a learned behavior a lot of times, sibling abuse. My brothers were, not all of them, but 3 of them were drug users, and 2 of them were really heavy-duty drug users and were so high and completely whacked out of their minds when they were in the home that we never knew what they were going to do. So it was a little bit scary being around them. And one time, my sister had a car. She had just gotten her car. She had just gotten her driver's license. And my brother was 2 years older than her, and he was so high, he wanted to go rob a prescription store, right? And so he held a knife to my sister's throat because she wouldn't drive him to go do this robbery. And so he held a knife to her throat, and I had to talk him out of slicing her throat because my mom would not call the police. My mom wouldn't get involved, and she was like, my mom told me to talk my brother out of killing my sister. So I had to sit there for like 2 hours and cry and pretend, oh, don't kill Kathy, don't kill our sister, because my brother was so whacked out. So I was used to talking to people who were extremely high, I was used to dealing with people who were suicidal. I was used to dealing with people who were ready to kill me. So later in life, what it did was it led me to live a very dangerous lifestyle. So I became involved with drug dealers, drug users, and was involved in some sort of kidnap situations where I was the person who was being kidnapped. And I actually talked myself to stay alive. I was actually able to keep myself alive by talking to these people. But that's because I knew how to get into the minds of people who were twisted, because I grew up with twisted people, so I knew how to talk to these people so that they would understand, where I was coming from, and I could be like them and diffuse the situation, right? Absolutely horrific. No child should ever have to go through that. And, this is, not every child who's abusive to their, a sibling who would abuse another sibling doesn't necessarily mean that they were abused as children. But the thing, because, they can just have behavioral problems, from probably, like they said here, watching television programs, movies, videos, computer games, or they may have an anger management problem. They may have some sort of mental illness that they need help with. Siblings that are aggressive and that are abusive towards other siblings doesn't necessarily mean that they were abused. It's just that if they were abused, if children are abused, it does set up that whole thing for learned behavior and passing that cycle on, right? So, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all children who are abusive have been abused themselves. That's just not the case. But it is interesting to sort of see, when I read this stuff, it totally makes sense to me because I grew up like this, and so I know what it's like. My brother that was the next oldest to me, so he was one of the younger, because he witnessed my mom beating me up all the time. He was actually the one that would slap me around, punch me, not kid-like, not for fun. Like he would literally, like my mom, he would watch my mom beat on me, so he would do the same if he didn't like something I was doing, or if he was, for instance, one time I was at school and I left the school grounds. I actually had my teacher with a note to go walk with my friend to take her home because she was ill and she didn't want to walk by herself. So my teacher, she just lived a couple blocks away from school, so my teacher said, yeah, I could go with her. So my brother actually saw me walking down the street and beat me up because he thought I was ditching school, and I was only in I think the third grade, so I wouldn't have been ditching school in the third grade anyway. And then he told my mom. So then when I got home, I was busted again and ended up catching a beating from my mom. So it was a bad day for me. And the thing is that siblings don't always protect each other, right? Now my brother actually did protect me some from my mother, from a couple of beatings. He actually got the belt out of her hand, and but not always. They won't always stand up and protect each other in an abusive environment. Depends on the situation. It depends on a lot of things. You know what I mean? Our family did not pull together because our parents were abusing us as siblings. The siblings actually turned on each other, except for two of my brothers. Two of my brothers really were very close, and they stuck together like glue. And they were very close in age, 1 year apart, and they were like a unit, right? My one brother was actually trying to always protect my other brother, and that my brother Chess was always trying to protect my brother Rob, because my brother Rob was the one that my dad used to beat on all the time. My brother, I seriously think he sexually used him too, because I witnessed something that was just mind-boggling. As a small child, right, I was confused because I couldn't figure out why my dad and my brother were on the ground and they had no clothes on, and my brother was struggling and trying to get away. And I think my dad was sexually using my brother, and in turn my brother sexually used me. So this is what I think, but I don't have any proof, so what we're going to do. But the thing is that my home was a very sick and twisted home, and that's why I'm speaking out again about this publicly, because I want people to know that this stuff is reality for so many people, and yet we have one side of society that says, "Oh, child abuse, no such thing. Oh, let's minimize this. We don't want to know the ugly truth behind child abuse. We don't want to know the ugly truth about what children have to go through when they're growing up in these homes. It's like, no, let's just sugarcoat it. Let's just minimize it. No, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And it's so important that the truth gets out there, because the more people willing to speak out and stand up and say, no, this is what happened, this is truth, and this is wrong, and it will never be right. It's absolutely horrific what it does. It's just horrible. But yeah, it's just bad when siblings don't stick together and they end up abusing each other. I'm going to go ahead and read on here. It says, in sibling abuse, quote unquote sibling abuse, Understanding Family Violence, Thousand Oaks, California, Sage Publications, Incorporated, 1998. I'll get his full name here. This is the guy that did these studies. Vernon R. Wee, W-I-E-H-E. Observed that abusive behavior between brothers and sisters is often considered sibling rivalry and is therefore not covered under mandatory reporting of abuse. The author conducted a nationwide survey of survivors of sibling abuse who had sought professional counseling for problems resulting from physical, emotional, and sexual abuse by a brother or sister. And the respondents were generally victims of more than one type of abuse. 71% reported being physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. An additional 7% indicated being just emotionally abused, pushing the total of emotionally abused victims to 78%. Emotional abuse took the forms of name-calling, ridicule, degradation, exacerbating a fear, destroying personal possessions, and torturing or destroying a pet. As far as the victims of sibling incest could remember, they were sexually abused at ages 5 to 7. The author, however, believed it was possible that the abuse started at an earlier age, and the perpetrator was often a sibling older by 3 to 10 years. The incest generally occurred over an extended period, so that was the study that they did. And I know one of my siblings abused me, and the reason I know is because they had long hair, and my brothers had long hair, and I think about this, the face, and I used to think it was my dad that had sexually used me, right? And it's a serious issue. For years I thought it was my dad because I really hated my dad, and I wanted to believe that it was my dad because I hated my dad, and I was like, yeah, I could believe that he would do something like that because I hated him. You know, he was a horrible, horrific man. And do I hate him now? No. You know what I mean? I hated him then. I hated what he was doing to my family, and I hated what he did to my mom and to all of us. But the thing is that's why I wanted to believe that it was him that had sexually abused me, because I didn't want to think it was one of my brothers, because I love my brothers, right? I think about it now, and I think about the fact that it was a younger person and they had long hair, and I actually bit them on the nose or the ear. I think it was the nose, to be honest with you, but it could have been the ear. But I was 8 years old, and I was, I have repressed memories. You know, it's not. Some of the memories are clear, some of them are not. So, you know, I didn't include that in my book. I actually wrote a book, A Life of Death or Redemption, and remember, recall something 100% and tell you exactly where the furniture was, what day it was, you know, what I was wearing. It wasn't that clear, then it didn't go into my book, right? But there are some other stuff that obviously I left out because I just couldn't get the full grasp of what it was, and I do plan on working through that and possibly, you know, getting some therapy. And, you know, because I want to find out exactly what happened. And some people would say, why would you want to? Well, for closure, right? I need to be able to heal and move on from that, right? So it's a huge issue when siblings abuse each other or abuse their younger siblings or a sibling of any age sexually or in any other way, right? It's absolutely it's bad enough that parents are abusing children, you know, and then you have a sibling who's abusing you. I actually know survivors who were, you know, sexually used, molested, abused by siblings. So it's not something that's actually all that uncommon, and that's the sad part. It's more common than you think. It's just that most people won't talk about it. Survivors, because you just don't hear their stories because they're not going public with it. It's not something you know, most people don't find this stuff very comfortable to talk about. And for me, I've had a whole lifetime to think about this stuff, and so, you know, I've been able to walk through it, work through it, you know what I mean, with a whole lot of pain and a whole lot of anguish, you know, and a whole lot of anger. But many people can't, you know, just don't feel comfortable disclosing abuse, and so they stay silent forever and never tell anybody, you know, that they were abused, right? So it's absolutely horrific, and you know, I just, you know, it just bothers me, you know what I mean? Like you would think that siblings would not be abusive to each other, that they would be there for each other, but that's not always the case, right? It says effects of sibling abuse and what parents need to know about sibling abuse. We enumerated the effects of sibling abuse based on his interviews with survivors of such abuse. So here's the effect of sibling abuse: poor self-esteem, problems in relationships with the opposite sex, difficulty with interpersonal relationships, re-victimization, eating disorders, alcoholism and drug abuse, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and suicide, whatnot, contemplating suicide. It's absolutely horrific. And so, you know, this is just something that happens, and this is very, very sad. So, you know, if you're someone who's suffered with this or suffering in this, you know, you make sure you get some help, right? And there is help out there for people, and I would say never give up. Never, ever give up looking for, you know, for that help, that hope, you know, because I'm 4 years on the other side of my, you know, beginning my healing journey, my real healing journey, and it's so much better on this side. But had I given up and killed myself or just not allowed myself to heal, which I had been doing for years, you know, then I wouldn't be able to experience what I'm experiencing now, which is freedom. You know, freedom from the chains, from the bonds, from being silenced, from being forced to wear the shame and the anguish and the, you know, the pain of that abuse. It wasn't mine, you know, and that's the whole issue. I didn't do that to myself. It was not my fault, and that shame doesn't belong to me. It belongs to my abusers, right? And so if you're in this situation, you know, you make sure you get some help. And if you have been, you know, and you're just having a hard time coping, make sure you reach out and get some help. And if you need any information that I might have, you know, like resources or info that I might be able to find for you, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or send me a message on Facebook. You can hook up with me on Facebook, Twitter, just anywhere, you know, my websites and whatnot. I do try to check my messages and get back to people, right? And so thanks for being here. I appreciate it, everybody tuning in. On tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor, another time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. in the morning. And I'm continuing to talk about a very graphic, my physical abuse, and it's very graphic, but I want people to know just what it does to people and just what it did to me. And what these children are going through out here right now who are being physically abused. It's absolutely horrific. So it's a very graphic show, and I'm going to continue talking about that for the rest of the week. So if you feel the topic may bother you, and you have to listen at your own discretion, if you feel it may bother you, then please don't listen to the show, right? So I'll be on tomorrow morning and then again tomorrow night on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, right? That's where you can find us, Dreamcatchers for Abused Children on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk. So thanks again, everybody, for listening to my shows. I appreciate you all being here, and have a great night and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.